Hi everyone, it's Ali. I want to welcome you back to the Surrender with Grace interview series. Today we have Christina Campbell joining us. Christina is a sexuality and empowerment coach based in California. Welcome to the series, Christina. It's great to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be here. It's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting, and I'm really interested to chat to you about this subject because I think it's pretty powerful. I think it's going to be pretty powerful for everyone. So do please go ahead and tell us about your journey, Christina, and why it is that you do the amazing work that you do now.
So I had a pretty rough childhood, just the typical story of divorce and remarriage, a lot of toxic marriages, a violent father who was in the pornography industry. And I was overexposed to pornographic material when I was in a really young age and started to act out my sexuality with children in elementary school. And that actually deeply wounded me. For a long time, I felt like I was the perpetrator of sexual abuse. And I actually had to deal with that a lot when I was older. But as I went through my teen years, I'd really been groomed by my father and by just exposure to pornographic material on top of all of our other social conditioning for women, that my sexuality was really like my worth. And I acted that out over and over again and re-traumatized myself in, sexual situations with boys, all from a young age. And then in my early 20s, I became a stripper and a sex worker at the age of 20. And I was in that industry for 7 years. And through that time, there was a lot of beautiful things that happened actually. And me understanding my own sexuality and also the wound of male sexuality in our culture. But there was a lot of trauma that happened. And I actually had to take responsibility for that trauma in my own life. I could no longer say, you did this to me, or it was a result of my childhood. And in my early 20s, because I was dancing and making money, I started to get therapy. And that's when I really started to work on myself at around age 24 and start to come to terms with my childhood and my deep-seated unworthiness. And what happened was that I actually thought that I was liberated sexually because of the job that I did and because I could show my body and I could experience my sexual energy. But what happened to me is that when I got into a committed relationship, I realized, I quickly shut down. And I realized that I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I had major intimacy issues. But in the beginning, I actually just blamed my partner. I blamed him, like he needed to be different to turn me on, to like bring me out of my shell. Because that's what we're sold. That's the story that we're sold, that if we meet the right man, that it's like happily ever after and they complete you. And what happened is that I had to do a lot of work, on myself. And I'm just grateful that my partner, I met him when I was 24, and we've been together for 14 years. And he has been, a solid supporter of me doing this work. And he has always been there for me, which has been, phenomenal to do that level of work and have support and someone that's like, right, holding the space. Because when you experience childhood trauma, it comes up in so many different ways. But I want anybody that's listening right now to know that you can break free from your patterns and the way that it comes out in your life. You can totally empower yourself and heal and have a beautiful, beautiful life.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Christina. It's a really powerful journey. I've got so many questions. So first of all, your husband, what an amazing man. I mean, you aren't married. Did you say you got married? Yeah.
Yes, we've been married for 10 years and we have 2 small children.
Yeah, that's in terms of, I mean, it's kind of like that journey you've been on that journey together. I mean, that's just amazing. that he loves you. I mean, that's just awesome, really, that you've been through all that together, and he's kind of been with you the whole process, and that he's cheering you on. And yeah, I've got lots of questions. So first of all, going back to when you were 20, I think you mentioned that you first decided to go and get some help and start talking to someone. What was the catalyst for you at that time? Was it a feeling that you just on every level, it was the right moment, you just felt wrong? Tell me what that was.
Yeah, so I had always lived with people, right? So I went to college and I had roommates, and then I moved into a house and I had housemates, and I went traveling through Central America for about 4 months, and I fell in love with this man, this Argentinian man, and the only way I was going to get him to the United States was through this fiancé visa. So we're in the fiancé visa process, and I just have this awareness, like, that I wanted to go live on my own for the first time. I was never going to live by myself in an apartment by myself and not share my space with anybody if he was going to be coming over. So this was my choice. So when I went to go live by myself and I was alone, I suddenly, quickly became aware of, like, that I had a really hard time being alone and just being by myself and with myself. And I just butted up against all of this longing and anxiety and fear, and everything came up for me. And I didn't trust myself, and I just was so uncomfortable. And I knew, I had had a messed up childhood. I mean, I started doing drugs when I was 14 years old, like, had heavy drug use. And I just knew, and I ended up, sharing something with a girlfriend, and she's like, you should go see my therapist. And I was really lucky that she was the one. I didn't have to go searching, for a therapist that clicked. And so it happened really smoothly for me to just go to that first session and find that connection. And I work with her weekly and sometimes twice a week for 4 years.
Okay, wow, that's brilliant. So, wow. So would you mind please sharing a little bit about how, I mean, I imagine for 4 years of seeing someone, those kind of level, you went through the layers of just, I can only imagine so many feelings. And I mean, I'm sure there's many, many layers. My question is around the feelings of shame. Was that a big one? And how does that affect you, if it still affects you today or not? How did you deal with shame?
Shame has been and still is the biggest emotion that I wrestle with when, it's the trigger that will pull me down. And I have just become better and better at noticing the shame and being able to, have the tools to get myself out of that spiral. I experienced so much shame, especially from things that I had done as a child with other children, and feeling that I was the perpetrator, and a lot of shame around a specific traumatic experience from my teenage years that I shared on another interview, which was that my father had actually orchestrated for me to, he got me drunk and stoned and allowed an adult man to have sex with me. But I did not say no. I went along with it, but I experienced such a deep level of violation that the only way that I could describe that was being raped. And for a long time, I said that I was raped when I'd actually had a consensual experience. But it was the feeling of coercion that I needed to do what my father had orchestrated for me to do in order for me to be accepted by him and loved by him, and to become like the woman that I was supposed to be. But there was such a deep level of violation in my in my saying yes and in the entire experience, that the only way that I could, describe it at such a young age was that I was violated on that level, was that I was raped. But then I lived with this deep shame that I was someone that had said that I was raped when I wasn't. I was abused, but I was not, like, I never said no, you know? So that was, it felt like, I had broken the trust with all women. There's this whole thing where women don't are not believed. It's a he said, she said story, and here I was, someone that had lied. I mean, that shame was so deep, so massive, and I had to come to terms with my childhood and understand what led me to that place, and really have compassion for this young 15-year-old girl that didn't understand how to explain what had happened in any other way. And just that compassion and empathy and building that for yourself. Having self-compassion is just a massive part of getting through shame and peeling back everything that's there, because this is what holds us back so often, especially with sexuality. Because what happens is that, sexuality is this normal, natural, beautiful thing that all humans are exploring when we come into our bodies, and we're exploring our bodies in all sorts of different ways. Like, how can I run, and how can I jump, and that we're wrong for that. And so there is a connection between sexuality and shame. And then as we really start to explore our sexuality in our teenage years, and we've got those hormones going through us, and we're going through our adolescence and puberty, then we want to explore our sexuality. And so often women are exploring their sexuality and feeling desire, feeling lust, feeling sexual, and themselves for it and holding themselves back. And so there's a connection between actually experiencing sexuality and shame. And so knowing that that's happening, and then having the tools to, like, be able to stay in the space of sexuality and let go of the shame, and let go of the fear, and let go of all of what society tells us that you are if you're a sexual person or a sexual woman. That's where the work is. That's where so much of the work is.
Yeah, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. That's really, really fascinating, Christina. So tell us how, so just before we move on from this shame, so in terms of the therapy that you had, the person that you saw, and the 4 years that you spent with someone, what kind of therapist did you work with, in terms of how was it, in terms of you coming through that, and how did you find a way that you've got an amazing husband as well by your side? So did you find that through talking about it? Tell us how you still deal with that today when it comes up.
So my therapist we did a lot of talk therapy for me to really understand my childhood and consciously come to terms with, who my parents were, the different situations that had happened, abandonment, all that stuff. And then we did a lot of somatic work with visualization and also internal family systems, which is like an inner dynamic work, where you have these different parts of yourself that want different things. And oftentimes, like, it's just the age-old thing, like, you want to lose 10 pounds, but then you're just like eating poor food or not going to the gym, because there's these two different parts of yourself that want different things. And so a lot of that kind of work. And really, for me personally, I needed to understand, like, that work in my early 20s was really cognitive. A lot of me, like, really just consciously understanding the family that I came from, and really understanding the abuse that I had gone through. And then I went through a period where I kind of didn't do a lot of work on myself. Like it was like, oh, okay, like now I understand it all. I'm good. and then it started to come up in different ways. And that's when I started to really need to do some work within my body and have practices in my life where I could connect to my body and actually get out of my head, because there's a point where we understand everything and we're still stuck. And that's where I think that really getting into your body and understanding that we are all like this one system, that our mind, actually our thoughts affect our emotions, and then our emotions affect our thoughts. And so having techniques and tools to actually change your emotional state is really powerful, and is what I do and is what I help women do.
Right, yeah, and also absolutely, and also I imagine those memories. Did you kind of do rejigging those memories to kind of find a way forward to deal with those better and things? So tell us about the work how do you work with people then? Tell us a little about that, because it could be that could be really beneficial for us all to understand.
So I work with women to really figure out what is holding them back, right? And so what is limiting their desire to connect? What is keeping them feeling stuck, like they can't move forward? And really figuring out what thought patterns, what behavioral patterns, and holding them accountable to make that change. But also, like I love NLP. Do you know NLP, neuro linguistic programming?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. So I love NLP, and I use a lot of NLP tools with my clients to really to anchor them, to remove certain anchors. What anchors are is that, all that we're going through our life and growing as young children, things happen, and in our subconscious mind, we create a map of the world. Like this certain thing, my mother yelled at me for touching my genitals, and therefore there's an anchor of shame and around sexuality. So we can change that by locating what these triggers are and actually doing the work to go back to that memory and release certain things, and then set a new anchor. And so that's the way I work with women. And I also work with women through visualization, through meditation, guided meditations, and hypnotherapy as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I imagine everybody's different in terms of what they've been through and their experience. Is that kind of the work that you do, is the 4-year kind of timeline normal? Is that the way that you work with people? How do you structure that? Or is there no structure? You just kind of start supporting them and it takes as long as it takes? Or do you feel it's an ongoing thing, really, that they're always going to need a bit of
No, I don't think that you have to think that you're always going to need, support from someone like a coach or a therapist. And I don't think that you can put a timeline on healing, because everybody is so unique and complex, and different things come up, and you go through a period, like all of us, go through a big period of transformation, of healing. And then there's a rest and an integration time. And then we come up against the next part of us that is ready to unfold. So I typically work with women in a 6-month period, 6-month packages, so that we have enough time together to really facilitate change, and they have the support that they need to continue. Because what happens is that stuff comes up. It is not always easy, and it's so easy to turn around and just say, you know what, it was better the way it was before. I don't want to do this anymore. And so actually getting into a relationship where you're committed to work with each other for a certain period of time, it keeps you on track. It keeps you in the game. It keeps you knowing that, like, you're doing this for this certain period of time, and you're committed. And I found that to be really powerful.
Right, that's really interesting. And so you're only working with women. What do you think it's more beneficial to work with women who are single or women who are in a relationship, or does it not really matter?
It does not really matter, because whatever's coming up for you is your individual experience. And so often, and what I have found in my personal journey and in the journey of supporting other women, is that even when you're in a relationship and you think that like your partner needs to do a whole bunch of work to change, I'm not saying that they don't need to do any work, because sometimes partners do need to do work, and mine did, you know, but that you can do so much work on yourself. And the way that you come into a relationship and all of the energy and beliefs and story that you bring